And we're live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to A Green World is Possible. It's a brand new show. That's the working title. This is the inaugural episode. Literally, we just thought of the idea about 2 hours ago, was it, when we were chatting on that last program?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier
so,
this evening.
so this is it. We're just going to go ahead, and what I like to do is I like my guests to introduce themselves. So just to let everyone know, I'm James Lane. I'm the host of this program, and obviously I'm wearing my Green Party shirt, so I'm very Green Party friendly. So no one can attack me about being an illegitimate person of the media, because we know the media has their preferences all the time for the Democrat or Republican. So I'm independent media, and I'm green friendly. There's nothing wrong with that. So anyway, allow you to introduce yourself, Charlene.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Charlene DiCalogero. I live in Berlin, Massachusetts, and I am a candidate for state representative in the 12th Worcester District, which is in central Massachusetts and covers Berlin, Boylston, Clinton, Lancaster, Northborough, and Sterling. If elected, I will represent roughly 40,000 people in the state of Massachusetts, and I will serve in the lower house of the Massachusetts State Legislature.
That's really great, and it's a very thankless job to run for office, right? Especially in a climate like this, where everyone's like saying, we just have to focus on getting Trump out of office, as if that'll solve all the world's problems. And so, tell me, what was your motivation to run?
So, I've been a Green since before Greens were thought of, I'm pretty sure. Since I was a kid, growing up in New York City, and in fifth grade, they started this new kind of unit, a brand new experimental unit in something called ecology. And I started learning about the nature in the bounds of New York City, and there was actually quite a lot. I guess Earth Day might have just started at that time, more or less, and people were moving to try to protect and restore habitats, even in such urbanized places as New York City. And so I remember going out to Jamaica Bay on a class trip and seeing this gorgeous bird with beautiful plumes called a snowy egret, and red-winged blackbirds, and just thinking, oh my God, I had no idea these things existed in my own city. I can't say I was thinking as a fifth grader of running for office. First time anybody said anything to me about that was college, and I looked at them like they were absolutely insane. Who would run for office, even in the late 70s, early 80s? But I got involved politically as a member of a women's martial arts school in Brooklyn now called the Center for Anti-Violence Education. And it was also a center for really progressive education. And I started understanding that violence wasn't just an individual problem, and that violence against women had origins in sexism, that it was present in seemingly every culture, and starting to understand how violence affected Black and brown women maybe differently than somebody like me, a white queer person. So fast forward through the years, I would think on and off about running for office, and living in New York City was like, there's no way I could break into politics in New York. There's too many people, too much money. So I didn't think of it until after I left the city and discovered that you can actually make a huge impact in small communities. that New York City, I think you can make an impact too. And you have, James. I am so impressed that you have run in New York City. Definitely, that's the heavy lift. But when I moved to Massachusetts, and especially once I moved out to central Massachusetts, I started understanding the role and the importance of our state legislature in so much of our daily lives. State legislatures have a lot to do with what happens in education, in healthcare, in over-incarceration, mass incarceration. A lot of that is state level, not federal. In regulating banks and foreclosures, states have an important role, or not regulating them and letting people be evicted from their homes for no good reason. So I started to think, well, maybe this is something I can do. I have some ideas. I've been active in some of these areas. And so 2015, I attended a training at our state house called the Citizens Legislative Seminar. 1.5 days, intensive, how a bill gets passed, working directly with state legislators. And I came out of there saying, I've been in the state house before. I've talked to my legislators before, but now I understand much more of how it works and who does this job. And one of the legislators said, somebody asked, so what do you need to have or know or do to run for office? And she said, I wasn't an attorney when I ran for office. I was a social worker. The only thing you need is to get enough people to vote for you. And I was like, oh, I can do this. I could totally do this. So that was the start of my first campaign for the same office that I'm running for now, state representative, in 2016.
Very cool. And what's very interesting about what you're just talking about is you're talking about the not sexy stuff of politics that people don't want to do, right? It's really amazing how many people figure, oh, you're running for office, that's so cool. You're going to be on these TV shows, and everyone's going to run around and support you and give you all this money and all this support, and you shake everyone's hand, and it's like, no, there's a lot of, not dirty work, but there's a lot of hard work involved in it, and there's a lot of hard work even when you're not a candidate. The stuff of putting together bills, proposals, all this stuff. You have people that have this idea, I want to run for president of the United States, and they have no idea of foreign policy. They have no idea of how everybody around the country is impacted by, the social economic system that we have in this country. So it's really about knowing the role that you're running for, right? So, and what's interesting in Massachusetts right now is you have a big movement going on along with your campaign, which is one of the things I always love to do, and especially because I don't want to steal your thunder right now, but I think that the big push that's going on in Massachusetts right now directly affects your campaign, and I'm pretty sure you're probably the only candidate that's openly talking about it, because it's about improving democracy. And what we've seen systematically is that the major party, the ones, sadly, the Democrats are the ones that are always against improving democracy. So I was wondering if you'd like to talk a bit about what's going on in Massachusetts right now.
Yeah, good point. To your point, Massachusetts has this reputation outside the state of being this wonderful, progressive, forward-thinking state. The state legislature has been dominated by the Democrats for decades, as far as I know. And you'd think we'd be living in utopia if the Democrats were all that. Yeah, no, they're not big on democracy here. And definitely neither the Democrats nor the Republicans. So yes, one of my buttons here is a little hard to read. It's kind of small, but it says ranked choice voting 1, 2, 3. And it is thanks to many, many volunteers, of whom I was one. It is going to be on the general election ballot here in Massachusetts. And it will cover a lot of our elections. So I'm very excited about it. Yeah, in terms of people, Democrats not being so excited about improving democracy, there's actually been a bill in the state legislature for 18 years to pass ranked choice voting. And they've sat on it like it was an egg made of stone. It's like, we're waiting for it to hatch. And it hasn't hatched, surprise. So yes, activists and ordinary folks took it into their own hands because we do have the ability to get legislation passed through direct voting. So yeah, I would say there are a number of progressive candidates who are supporting RCV, who are supporting ranked choice voting. However, we are also starting to see attacks on it. Like, it's too hard, it's confusing, how confusing is it to write 1, 2, 3? So, so that is definitely very exciting. I also have signed a transparency pledge. There's an organization that is doing work on that here in Massachusetts. You should see the videos they have of the lower house in action. Because the really mind-blowing thing in some ways about our legislature is that most of the votes they take, whether in committee or on the floor of the House, the lower chamber, are unrecorded. I pay a living wage to my legislators, and I have no way to know how they voted on most bills. That's not democracy as I understand it. And I mean, Massachusetts is apparently, again, according to this organization, I think they're called the Action Network, one of the most secretive legislatures of any state in the country. So that is a big reason why I want to get into the state house and work with other people who I know are in office, who are trying to change this, and say, no, the people deserve to know what you're doing in our names, and so we can hold you accountable. Otherwise, voting, we have no record on which to judge these people. No public record.
Yeah. That's a huge point, because we're seeing this not just at the state level, but nationally. Like when they've been doing these PPE proposals and whatever, these laws, pass these bills and saying, oh, we're going to approve this money to go to blah blah blah. When you look on the website to follow who voted a certain way, you'll see they were voice votes. So nobody could be held accountable for doing something for or against the people. And it's one of those things where it's like, how is that allowed? I mean, we need to know who is voting a certain way, so then when it's time for them to get reelected, we vote them out if they're bad. But this is like such a slimy practice that they do at the national level, and it goes all the way down to the local levels, or vice versa. It starts locally and goes up to the national level. So I'm glad to hear about this.
Yeah. And I think when people hear about that this is something that many people don't know, it is very hard to get information below federal elections and federal government. A lot of people don't know who their state legislators are. If I tell them, they might say, oh, yeah, I heard of this person. Well, the person who was in the position that I am now running for was in that position for something like 24 years. And it's pretty clear to a lot of us who live in the district that he hasn't been doing a whole lot in that time. He was literally out of the country for months at a time. Our lower house, you cannot vote unless you are physically present. 40,000 people had no representation for months. Months. Now, whether he knew that nothing was happening, it's like, oh, you won't miss me, or what, I like, no, I'm going to be a full-time legislator. I'm going to be working, I'm going to either be in the state house or in my district, or, traveling around the state looking at issues of social justice, of living wages, of universal child care, so that, the idea, there are countries, plenty of countries, that you have child care. It is a government service. You can expect that. One of my the other people who's running for this seat has said, well, I'll make childcare affordable. Affordable, I've heard it talked about in connection with housing, and I know as soon as they use the A word, they mean not anything most ordinary people can pay for, because they never say affordable for whom. So yeah, it definitely, it's so great to have a party that has 10 key values to help guide its candidates and its elected officials in how we should be making judgments about bills, or how we should be writing bills, how we should be formulating a state budget so that it is actually giving, equitable amounts of money, not just equal, but equitable according to what people need. So poor districts like here in Massachusetts, Worcester and Springfield, and in my district, I think the town of Clinton, because of the higher levels of low-income people, higher numbers of low-income people, those students need more assistance, not an equal amount to kids who live in a McMansion or an honest-to-God mansion. So yeah, I really appreciate the people who founded the Green Party in the United States and the other parties around the world. It's really a wonderful thing to be part of an international political movement that's for people, planet, and peace.
Yeah, and that's important to realize too, because there's a lot of talk right now, yesterday specifically, about having a new major third party in this country. This People's Party. We need a People's Party, and I'm like, the Green Party's been around since like 1984. It's a global party, and because it was created out of the labor movement and the anti-war movement and environmental movement, and and it's like all of the things that you're talking about in all these little parties you want to create has already been created since what, it's like 40 years ago or more, but nobody wants to accept it. Nobody wants to, it's like that thing of, because we didn't create it, we just can't get into it, and you have to stop. We have like 10 years to do something about our climate, or that's the end of everything, right? And right now, they're talking about creating a new party that's going to take at least 10 to 20 years to get anywhere, and by that time, it's too late. Time's up. And that's why, when we were talking earlier in that other broadcast about, hey, let's get together and talk, I wanted to have a conversation about your campaign, the issues that you're running on, and also just in general of where you think we're all going to go, But let's go back to your campaign for a minute. So people always do the whole thing and say, if you win or when you win. But I was going to say, if or when you win, what are your plans? What are you going to do with your role?
So, one of the first things I want to do is change the rules of how the state legislature runs itself. There was an attempt to do this at the beginning of this session, I think, in 2018. And I commend the bravery of those state representatives who attempted to change those rules for much greater transparency. They didn't succeed, but I mean, that was actually progress to expose the fact that the power structure actually doesn't want you to know what they're up to. So I would definitely join that effort. I would do what I am hopeful that ranked choice voting will pass on the ballot. One thing we have seen is Greens and people who were before they were green, who were doing things who became green, got ballot initiatives passed in Massachusetts for public funding for term limits. And the state legislature repealed those ballot initiatives in the middle of the night, literally.
As they always do, always in the middle of the night.
It's amazing. So, so I will do my very best to make sure that doesn't happen and alert people and get people to, to flood the phones and emails and show up at the State House or wherever legislators are lurking and say, this cannot happen. So another thing is absolutely to pass the, good, strong climate bills that prioritize environmental justice communities, people who have an overabundance of high polluting infrastructure like compressor gas stations. This is happening on the South Shore in Massachusetts in Weymouth, and people all over the state have been fighting that. They already have plenty of pollution, and they're citing this natural gas compressor, and the gas, none of it's coming to the state, and most or all of it is actually going to be exported overseas. So it is pure fossil fuel company greed. The governor's for it. The governor happens to be a Republican, but I'm not sure it'd be really different if there were a Democrat in office. 100% renewable energy. There have been bills. I've been an advocate as a member of 350 Central Mass for 100% renewable energy by 2030. As you say, we have very little time, and the legislature keeps saying, I don't know.
Right.
They're really just not understanding the urgency. I was one of the organizers for the Worcester Climate Strike Coalition, who in the fall of 2019, along with people all over the world, were doing various kinds of actions up to and including walkouts by students and workers from whatever on the Fridays, Fridays for the Future. We did a die-in in front of Worcester City Hall. We did a mock funeral for the earth, really to try to bring home, what does this mean? And I made a poster that with a picture of the earth saying, who will save my humans and 1 million species? That's the kind of horror that we are facing if we are gonna honestly look at what all the credible science says. So I am glad in some ways that I wasn't elected earlier, because I feel like I can walk in and say, I don't know what business as usual is, except from what I know from the outside as an advocate, and we don't have time for it anymore. So it is so urgent, and really the Greens are the people The Green New Deal originated with the Greens, in case people hadn't noticed the name. So I don't mind our good ideas being stolen if you're really going to do it. The problem is the Democrats have watered it down. So it's not going to work. We have to have a genuine systemic change that deals with the capitalist, gone amok with racism that makes capitalism the way we have it possible, and say, no, everything is connected. We have systems problems and they require system solutions.
Yeah. No, that's solid. That's 100% on point. And the whole idea, like I said before, people's focus on, well, okay, that all sounds good, but this election, we just have to get Trump out. We just have to get Trump out. And it's like, but look who he's running against. He's running against someone that's a biggest perpetrator as he was. Approving the Iraq wars, the crime bills, imprisoning more black and brown people than anyone ever. I mean, and I really always get a lot of backlash for this, but I'm like, I cannot celebrate the election of our first black president for 8 years when all he seemed to have done was just continue with George Bush's, policies and practices. And when you have, people getting killed by police, and you have a black president and he's not coming out to say anything about it or to do any kind of executive orders like Trump does. Like, as soon as Trump's elected, he's writing executive orders left and right. And Obama just pretty much stands, where he is and just says, thinks everyone's going to work it out. And they're not. And,
yeah.
And everyone's just still celebrating. It's like, yeah, but we have our black president, or we have our Democratic president. That's really what it comes down to. The Democrat must be good. So, look, there's no wars. I'm like, yeah, but there's drones going on. There's trillions of dollars going out into billions and trillions of dollars going out to just, fuel our military budgets. Then when they have the discussion about, healthcare, why can't we get, a single payer or universal or Medicare for all? So there's no money for that. But there seems to be endless amounts of money to kill people around the world. And we've seen this, like you said before. Voting Democrat does not save you from that practice. It's a systematic change we have to do until we can get to a situation where we can have people like you and me run for office and win and get elected. That's when we'll see changes. Other activists, people, they don't have to be like real activists, like people that are working in their communities to do things to make things better for the people in their communities. If we can enable them with the power to make these changes, that'll be much better than what we have right now. Because like you said, we're electing people. There's no transparency on what they're voting for, who they're getting money from, and then when you do find out and you try to share that with the masses, you get shut down and gaslit. Oh, you're just spreading around stuff because you hate this person or you hate that person. It's like, no, we're trying to inform you. We're trying to do everything that the media is not doing right now. So that's, once again, that's why I'm so happy to have you on this broadcast right now and talking about, your campaign, your issues, what you're going to do if and when you get elected. One of the things I want to ask you, when did you officially start your campaign?
So I started planning in the fall. Mm-hmm. And I had all kinds of wonderful plans. Because I had run twice before for legislative office, I had a fairly good idea of what I would want to do. And that involved lots of door knocking. Great. Yeah, and I started collecting signatures in February, which is when the papers come out, and you have to get in Massachusetts a certain number of signatures to get on the ballot. And when things started shutting down in March, I was, how am I going to do this? And I can tell you the powers that be in this state, we're not fazed at all. We're not concerned that candidates who, otherwise would have gotten on the ballot might not be able to with the law as it currently stood. So I was fortunate in that I had some donations early on, and I had, I'd already had my treasurer and my campaign account, and I had money that I was able to spend on mailing out nomination papers, which is a thing no one does. Mm-hmm. But that was, our Secretary of the Commonwealth's answer to, oh, well, you could just mail these out. And of course, people will open up and read all the instructions carefully and sign it and send it back to you. No. I mean, some people did, and I'm very grateful to all of those people who did. But it took a lawsuit in our Supreme Judicial Court, the state's highest court, to reduce the required number of signatures to get on the ballot. So having had that running start of money and understanding of how the process works, I was the only Green Rainbow candidate and the only alternative party candidate to get on the ballot by the beginning of May. There's no libertarian running in any state, or district race this year, which is not usually what happens. So, it was that got me, over the hurdle, the combination of doing the mailing and the court's ruling, so that I had enough signatures that it was, I was able to get on the ballot.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's such a huge accomplishment as a Green, with all the odds against us, right?
Really, really.
Yesterday I was arguing with a bunch of people, saying, well, the Greens have had their chance. They never seem to be able to win elections, or they can't do this, they can't do that. And I'm like, well, as you mentioned, there are a lot of things stacked against us, especially,
it's getting higher.
And it's getting harder. And the goalpost is always changing. It's always moving. It's like, you need to get 100,000 signatures. A Democratic governor comes in and says, no, you need to get 200,000 signatures. Middle of the night, the decision is made.
Yeah. And that the truth is that affects everybody, even in the corporate parties. It affects those candidates. I know a Latinx woman who I had been talking to about running for office as a Green Rainbow candidate. She's a fabulous activist. She's had some experience in public service, is really of the community, and just terrific in every way. And she actually called me, or she texted me and said, let's have a phone call, to tell me that she was going to run for a legislative office as a Democrat. And then she told me what they were asking, how much money they were asking her to raise. Now, only a few years ago, I was told, if you're going to run for state rep, ideally you would have something like $15,000 to run. That is a very difficult amount to reach for a Green in a not terribly wealthy district. Mm-hmm. Plus, running clean and green, I don't accept corporate lobbyist money and all of this, and I don't even accept the maximum annual donation, again, because I don't want to be unduly influenced by somebody with more money to throw at politics. They were telling her she needed to raise $200,000.
Oh my God.
Working class women, we are not talking Cambridge, Mass. We are not talking New York City. Yeah. And sometime later, she pulled out before really running. And I still don't know what happened. But I said to her, and I forget if it was before or after the money conversation, But what I said to her was, I understand why the Democrats want you to be the face of their party. I don't know if you want to be the face of their party. So, yeah, that's horrifying. It's horrifying. And one of the things I will work for as a state legislator, I will write legislation, I've been working on it, to publicly fund all elections at, the level sort of commensurate with the level of the office, so that everybody has the same pot of money, they can't spend anything else, and that playing field becomes level. She could run in a campaign like that, and she could probably win. So, yeah, I think when people understand how corrupted, I mean, I feel like the C word gets used a lot, but really, this is the appropriate use.
I was like, wait, which C word?
Corrupted.
Okay, this is
Corrupted.
PG show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that is unconscionable that candidates should be told to raise that kind of money. And I don't even think it was really intended for her own campaign, because candidates, there are rules about campaigns being able to give money to other campaigns and give to the state party. And my understanding was that before 2016, the Democratic Party was basically bankrupt, which is how Hillary Rodham Clinton got to be the nominee without a primary, really.
Yeah.
Because she could raise money and she made a deal. And that is not democracy.
Right.
Yeah.
And once again, here we go talking about, democracy and the Democrats. And you just said everything about the legitimacy of the campaign is based on how much money you can raise. But yet these are apparently so-called the people that we need to get money out of politics. And it's like, but if that's your standard for picking legitimate campaigns, you'll never get the money out of politics. You need to just do it. Just say no more. Like you said, publicly funded campaigns as of September 1st. Yep. And that's it, Yep. There's more than enough money. Like in New York, talk about New York for 2 seconds. We have a campaign finance board, right? And they go up and down depending on who's in office, as far as if you raise X amount of dollars, you get a 4-to-1 match. I think in 2017 it was up to like 6-to-1 match, and the guise is that this will help smaller candidates run an effective campaign against these huge incumbents. But it's not true, because those people that are raising $1 million aren't excluded from that campaign. So, or that campaign finance program. So I raise $1,000, I get $6,000. My opponent raises $1 million, he gets $6 million. It's still proportionally out of place. And so they need to, and if there's that money sitting around to fund that guy for $6 million, like, where's that money coming from? We have
from us.
Right. It's like, there's no money for this, no money for housing, no money for food programs, no money for schools, no money for this. But we have more than enough money to give this candidate millions of dollars to spend it on who knows what. That's one thing I love about Green Party and grassroots campaigns. They're mostly volunteer based. A lot of the money that we're raising is going for materials or maybe office rentals. A lot of campaigns that I've worked with, they operated right out of this basement. It's like, why spend thousands of dollars a month for space when you can do it right from a friend's basement that has street access, so people could come in and get materials and whatever. It's just mind-blowing. So
yeah,
democracy for the Democrats always equals money. Greens and other third-party candidates will never be seen as legitimate in their eyes because they're not raising money. And they're using the C word again. They're corrupt because they're accepting that money, taking it to the national level. they say, oh, there's nothing we could do about gun laws. You know, oh, the gun lobbyists are the most powerful lobbyists in D.C. You have no idea. It's like, no, what you just told me was you're accepting money from the gun lobbyists and voting along with them. And that's what I've seen at the national level. We've seen it at the state levels, right? You've seen it.
Absolutely.
So it's just craziness. So sorry for being so chatty, but you know, this is what this
No,
is.
it's great. It's really great to sort of hear your perspective of what's been going on. You mentioned something earlier that, yeah, we should, you know, highlight very explicitly, which is the media now requires, basically the media doesn't care if you're on the ballot. Mm-hmm. We had 3 candidates for statewide office in 2018. We had Juan Sanchez, who ran for Secretary of the Commonwealth. We had Jamie Guerin, who ran for state treasurer, and we had another candidate for state auditor. And to me, if they're on the ballot, which is thousands of signatures, so it was not a minor effort, that's the only requirement. That should be the only requirement for media coverage. We could not get the public radio and TV stations to cover our candidates. And then you have people on nationally syndicated shows that come out of both Boston and Washington, D.C., or no, Boston and I think New York City. This was a show called On Point. August of, I think it was 2018, either 2018 or 2019. They aired a show, and a bunch of the show was about how various Trump people were getting indicted or had been convicted, like Paul Manafort and this and that and the other thing. And then their so-called news analyst somehow gets talking about the Green Party. And he's like, oh, they're really nefarious. That is the word he used, nefarious. They're really terrible. They're nefarious. And I'm like, you were just talking about Paul Manafort and I don't know, maybe Steve Bannon and all these people. Right. And you think we're nefarious, who have zero power, no money, haven't done all the things you've just said are so terrible. And we could not get them to retract.
Wow.
Could not get them to retract. There was no acknowledgement that this, you know, he was talking about, of course, you know what they always talk about, James, right? Mm-hmm. Ralph Nader and the 2000 election.
Still, 20 years later.
I lived through that election. You lived through that election. Yeah. Guy lived through that election. And he says nothing about hanging chads and butterfly ballots and numerous candidates. There were numerous candidates for president in Florida, any combination of whom had more votes than Ralph Nader did. But it's always, I mean, it's so interesting. They want accountability. They want God knows what they want. It's really hard to say. But when it comes to their own accountability, he made me lose. This weakling guy who's 1/10 my size. It wasn't that I ran a bad campaign. It was this person who, you know, got a relatively, you know, tiny percentage of all the votes. Their fault. You know, grow up.
Yeah.
So, and of course, you know, ethnically cleansing voter rolls in Ohio, in Texas, in Florida. What was that about? You know, yeah. Not covered by any media in this country, but covered by Greg Palast. Yeah. If you haven't read or seen the movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, see it. Read it, because that is a lot of what happened in 2000 and again in 2004. So, yeah, the media here is, you know, even the so-called public media is so bought and paid for by, you know, the by the Koch brothers. Koch Industries was sponsoring news in Boston. I'm like, how does that happen? Yeah, we are in seriously bad shape. I want public media to do its job. I'm not suggesting that they have to be biased for us. I'd just like them to include us as part of the democratic process that they supposedly are responsible for covering.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so we can do a whole thing on the media. Because this like you said, the media's responsibility should be reporting facts, right? It shouldn't, if you talk to a media person, if you talk to a reporter, say, hey, so who are you voting for this election? Oh, I can't talk about that. I'm in the media. I'm not allowed to tell you about my opinion. But yet, when it comes time to say, oh, are you going to cover this person? That person, oh, what? They're nefarious, right? You have an opinion about that, but you're not supposed to talk about who you're voting for. It's amazing. It's like, we know where you stand. We know where you're getting money for. We know what organization you're working with. That's why I tuned off of major media in 2002. Because like I said, we lived through Ralph Nader. We lived through. They're going to come up with a talking point. Spoiler. Let's spread that word spoiler around, and everyone just use it. They don't even know why they're using it, but we're going to label them a spoiler, and that's going to be the label that's going to stick with them for the next 20 years. Because that's what they do. They implant an idea into people, and the people that don't have I'm not, when I say these things, I am really not like disrespecting people, but if you're just getting all of your information from sitting on the couch and flicking on the TV and whatever is getting pumped to you like Clockwork Orange, and you're accepting it as that's all that's going on in the world, you have a big problem. Because once you turn that channel to something that's a little bit more radical or a little bit more independent, that's not getting money, you'll see the different side of everything. You'll see, oh, wow, there really is, innocent people in Palestine that are being abused by this Israeli military. Oh, there really is an issue with black people getting killed by cops. Oh, there really is corruption in our electoral processes, and it had nothing to do with Russia. That's what you see when you get away from the major media. So, I started Hot Indie News and Hot Indie Media like pretty much almost like right after the Nader campaign, and when we were trying to, in 2002, when we were trying to run a governor's race, and I just saw all this stuff going on. So, I was just like, look, we're spending our weekends, evenings, time, away from our loved ones to get things done. And then when you come back after 8-12 hours of doing this work, and you turn on the TV and like, there's nothing about it. You've done all your work you're supposed to do. Like, people don't understand if they're, oh, the Greens aren't effective. I don't know about that person. It's like, hey, we're doing everything we're supposed to do by the book. We have like our like your campaign committee, right? You have your press person, your campaign manager, your treasurer, your media person, your volunteer coordinator. You have the team together. You're going out there, you're talking to people, you're sending out your press releases, media releases, inviting media to your press conferences, and they don't show, and they don't report it, and they don't do once again, so they're not reporting the truth, and we're the ones that look like we're not doing our job, So like, I can go on for media, and I don't want to, because this isn't their time, this is your time. And we're actually getting up to the hour. I can't believe how quickly this time went together. But what I really want to do is, in these last like 5 minutes or so, I really want you to tell people about, where to go to make a donation to your site. I've had this, let me see if it's still up, make sure. Yeah. So I have your link, in the bottom of the screen, in the lower third down there, so people could see where to find out more about you, to volunteer. Just let everyone know that's watch this right now. You don't actually have to live in Massachusetts to volunteer or donate. You can get involved with this campaign by going to the link and just signing up and seeing what you could do. a lot of times with campaigns, it's all about word of mouth. Like you said, we don't have millions of dollars to send out mailers and get a crew of people out and talking to people, but it could be as simple as like sign up to your your media releases or your newsletters and encourage those people to forward it to 10 or 20 people, and that's how we get it out that way. But anyway, so enough with me chit-chatting. So final statements from you. Tell everybody, why they should get involved with your campaign, even if they're not green friendly. Why it's so important to get involved with your campaign.
Yeah. So I think it's one thing people should know, whether or not you are currently registered as a green. And the majority of voters in Massachusetts are registered unenrolled. So that tells you something. Unenrolled means independent in Massachusetts. So whether you're independent or registered green, or even registered as a Democrat or a Republican, I think you probably, if you've listened this far, you understand that somebody who's running a serious campaign makes a careful choice and makes a courageous choice in stepping outside the very small boxes that our current political system allows most candidates. In some ways I think, if I ran as a Democrat, then I would be taken seriously and people would cover me and all of that stuff. But, I know that system, that party machine, chews people up. And I actually really empathize with some of those folks, because I think they'd like to be doing and saying what I am doing and saying, but they are muzzled. It takes courage and commitment and integrity to run as a Green Party, or in Massachusetts, Green Rainbow, to run as a Green candidate. I do this because I care that our people are suffering. The suffering is now much more visible than it was before the pandemic, but it was always there, and it was visible if you looked. So the exposure of people who have been consistently abused and neglected by the political system and the greed, the system of greed, really, is what we have in this country, who die younger, who get sick and sicker more easily because of a system that has been in place that is a system that keeps a small group of mostly white men in power. Has to change if we are actually going to have a chance for everyone to live a decent life, for us to act as urgently as we need to act in the face of the climate emergency, which will affect all of us, and there will be no exceptions. That too takes courage, commitment, integrity. And to say, the first thing that is going to be true is I'm only taking low donations to help my campaign. I will take at most a third of the legal limit in Massachusetts per year, which is $333. The legal limit is $1,000 from any single person, in order to make sure I'm representing all of my constituents equally, that I'm actually listening to the people who are most affected by the ongoing neglect and abuse of our legislators in the State House. We can have real democracy, real transparency. We can have living wages and a fair tax system that charges the people who can most afford it the most and not the people who can afford it least, as we currently essentially do. We can have good education for everyone. We can have health care for all. This is definitely a policy that the Democrats run away from at every opportunity. So there's so much we can do together if we say we can make choices beyond the Tweedledum and Tweedledee that we are being offered. So I hope you will vote for me if you're in my district in Central Massachusetts, or help support my campaign. If you're outside Massachusetts, I bet you have friends in Central Massachusetts, or you have friends in Massachusetts and they have friends in my district. Spread the word. And I hope you will look into who else is running around the country as a Green and think about supporting them. We are always looking for good candidates all over the country. James, I wish I could have voted for you. I would have been like dancing to the polls.
I wish you would have too.
Yeah, I know. All my friends were saying the same thing. Can't I vote for you anyway?
Sorry.
And, we want to have more candidates running from underrepresented constituencies. We want more Black and Brown, LGBTQ, new Americans, immigrants running for office who represent the communities that they're going to serve, who have already been working for the communities they're going to serve. So think about it. Think about who you know, or maybe you could be running for office. We are mere mortals. If we can do it, you can do it.
That's really great. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right too. I should have actually. Oh, actually, I keep saying actually. I have right here gp.org. So that's the main website for the Green Party of the United States. So if people want to find out more about the Green Party, they can go to gp.org and they can mention, or they could research the platform. They could research the caucuses, right? Are you a member of the Lavender Caucus, or?
I work a lot at the state level. Mm-hmm. So I'm on our state committee, and I have been co-chair for the past couple of years, and I'm also in my regional chapter. So I think my cup is full.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of work.
Maybe a time in the future.
But it's great because, new people that are coming into the party, it's great to, well, it's debatable because if you jump right into a caucus and all the work and the policies and, that could scare people away. I know for a fact I'm a member of the Black Caucus, and what we try to do in our caucus is we try to make that a nurturing place where we support the new members. We try to share with them, what the processes are, what the policies are, because all you need is like somebody to get a little bit of misinformation. It's like, oh, you see, they're racist. they're not accepting. It's like, no, there's things you have to do before you get to that step. And if you're not doing those things, of course you're not going to get to that step. So that's what we try to do there. We try to make our caucus what we want to see the party be. And that's what we want to do with everything in these grassroots campaigns, organizations. If you're like a community leader, whatever you're doing in your community, that's most likely what you want to see happen at the national level. So we're trying to create a vehicle so you can do all those wishes and dreams and wants that you want actually become a reality. And the only way it happens is by getting involved. As frustrating as it is to sit back and watch, like you said, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and a lot of people just say, forget it, and hold their vote. I know. I've held my vote until I was 35, until I found out about Ralph Nader running in 2000. So that whole Nader v. Gore thing, it's like I never would have voted for Gore if I never knew there was a Green Party. So there's a lot of us out there. But anyway, enough with me. Thank you for those closing statements. The website's right down here, so people want to find out more about your campaign. Fully encouraged to go to the website, check it out. reach out to you. Like I said, if you don't have money, we totally understand. The whole
Hmm.
country's shut down and the government's not doing anything to help.
Yeah.
But if you could just forward an email, if you have email on your phone or whatever, that will really help with spreading the word. Because as we mentioned, you know, the 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 Democrats and Republicans are fighting hard against third parties. The media doesn't want to accept third parties. The commissions on debates, or even nationally and locally, don't want to accept third party. They don't want those voices out there because they don't want people to have that power. They don't want them to see how strong they could be if they just said, you know what? I've been voting Democrat for like 50, 60 years and nothing has gotten better. Like you said, Massachusetts, everything should be like butterflies and rainbows. New York City, everything should be sparkling, clean, and happy. And it's like these are corruption is just running rampant. So encouraging people to think outside the box, get involved with the Green Party, reach out to us. We're here. We could answer any questions, and definitely get involved in your campaign, and you know any level possible. Like you said, you'll have friends. You don't live in your district. You have friends that live in the district. Get them involved in your campaign. So that's all for me. I usually don't like to talk much, but I've been talking a lot.
Thank you so much, James. I so appreciate this opportunity to get to talk about what my campaign is about and to get to connect with you. It's always a delight.
Well, it was definitely a surprise seeing you on that previous live stream. So I was like, whoa, you just appeared. We have to do an interview. So I'm glad this worked out.
Yes, we Greens have secret powers.
That was
But
so
they're
cool.
good powers.
Now, if we could use our secret powers to get, to defeat all the hurdles that we have, that would be the best thing. And once again, we're talking like we don't win election. We have 129 office holders around the country right now. We have to keep saying that. Greens do win elections when people vote for Greens. It's a basic numbers game. In this presidential election right now, we're going to probably see the lowest voter turnout in the country's history. And it's not going to be because of, the post office didn't get ballots, or Russia interference, which doesn't exist, or Trump holding mail or whatever. It's just about people don't want to vote for the two choices that they're presented with. And they're also being denied the knowledge of their options. And without that knowledge, like, knowledge is power. They don't want you to have that power. So it's up to us to spread this word, like spread this live stream to a bunch of people, let people know that, there's a great Green Party candidate running in Massachusetts that needs your help. Get them involved and get you elected. Make some changes.
Yeah, there's something to look forward to.
Alrighty, so I'm going to sign off. Thank you, everyone that's watching this.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody, wherever you are.
Yeah, I see there's antisocial. He's I don't know if it's he or she. It's funny about the internet. We never know, right? So I'll just say antisocial. Follows a lot of my streams, and I think I'm going to chat after the broadcast to see how it was perceived. So there you go.
Cool. Great. Thank you again. Have a great
No.
night.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.